Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is all set to visit Indonesia during the first week of September. The visit will help fortify India's active involvement in the ASEAN community and reinforce diplomatic bonds in the Indo-Pacific region. Scheduled from September 6th to the 7th, the visit will be the Indian Prime Minister's second trip to Indonesia within a year. Narendra Modi attended the G20 summit in Bali last November. Remember, New Delhi will host the annual G20 summit this year from the September 9th to 10th. During his stay in Indonesia, Prime Minister Modi will participate in key meetings, including the East Asia Summit and the India-ASEAN Summit. Prime Minister Modi's presence underscores the continuity of India's proactive engagement with ASEAN nations. Now, the upcoming engagement holds significant importance within the framework of India's Act East policy. The ASEAN partnership stands as a cornerstone of India's foreign policy strategy. The steady growth of trade and investment in relations between India and ASEAN underscores mutually beneficial collaboration. The country is welcoming foreign leaders and delegates amid mounting concerns over toxic air. The Indonesian capital was ranked the most polluted city on global charts nearly every day last week. Even the Indonesian President, Joko Widodo, is affected as he deals with a stubborn cough for 4 weeks that some say may be caused by bad air. Now, the upcoming weeks are poised to see a flurry of high-level diplomatic activities for the Indian Prime Minister. Here's a wrap-up of the dates. The BRICS summit is from August 22nd to the 24th. This will be held in South Africa in Johannesburg. ASEAN summit meetings in Jakarta are from the 5th to the 7th of September. And then, of course, the G20 summit, which India holds the presidency for. It will be held in New Delhi from the 9th to the 10th of September. All right, for more on this, we are being joined by our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibal, who's joining us from New Delhi. Siddhant, it's a power-packed schedule over the next couple of weeks for the Indian Prime Minister at least. Let's start with the BRICS summit coming up in just a few days from now in Johannesburg. Give us a brief on what to expect and what's next.
Well, Shivan, the summit season is on us as the world leaders crisscross Asia and Africa for the various summits. Now, when it comes to the BRICS summit, that will take place next week in Johannesburg. For the Indian side, the focus will be on following things. First, of course, BRICS expansion. It is now given that expansion is on the cards, and we will see a formal announcement of the norms that will be considered when it comes to inclusion of countries. South Africa has got requests from almost over 20 countries to be part of this mega grouping. For India, focus, of course, will be on Africa, as India will be reaffirming its relationship with the continent. Remember, 30 countries are invited by the South African presidency, most of them from Africa. And when India holds the G20 summit in a few weeks from now, India's big focus and outcome will be inclusion of the African Union in the G20 grouping. In fact, yesterday, the South African High Commissioner, speaking to WION, exclusively backed India's proposal for inclusion of African Union in this mega grouping. Other than that, BRICS, of course, will provide a lot of opportunities for the Indian Prime Minister to engage with his counterparts. And of course, all eyes will be if there will be a bilateral meeting between Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping. Relationship between the two countries have fallen since the Galwan incident, in which the Chinese aggressive action led to the death of several Indian soldiers. Since then, there hasn't been any face-to-face bilateral meeting, even though there was this handshake last year in Bali, in which the Indian Prime Minister called for a relationship which is, of course, devoid of the problem, which is the border issue. So will there be a meeting is something that will be much talked about in Johannesburg.
Now, Siddhant, next up, of course, is the Indian Prime Minister's visit to Indonesia. How do you see the East Asia Summit and the India-ASEAN Summit shaping India-ASEAN ties, and what's in store?
Well, one thing I would like to give as a background is that last year when the ASEAN summits took place in Cambodia, India was represented by the Indian Vice President and he visited the country to represent India, where there was an elevation in the relationship between the bloc and India. India, of course, has been pointing out that how ASEAN centrality is important when it comes to the Indo-Pacific's stability, and has been focusing on first trade with the bloc and also connectivity. Remember, the India, Myanmar and Thailand trilateral highway is something that India has been focusing on. The Sitwe port in Myanmar, there's strong connectivity when it comes to Indonesia as well now with the direct flight which has started. But all in all, for the Indian Prime Minister, it will be a short visit, just one day before the G20 summit begins here in Delhi. So this will give a kind of precursor to the mega diplomatic meeting which will be happening here in Delhi, because not only the 10 ASEAN leaders will be present, including Indonesia, which is a member of the G20 and also the host, but also invited member countries as well, including countries like Australia. In fact, the Australian Prime Minister has already confirmed that he will be traveling to Jakarta to attend that all-important meeting, the East Asia Summit and Australia-ASEAN meetings, and of course, opportunity to meet with the Indian Prime Minister as well.
Right. Siddhant, thank you for all those inputs. Definitely, the trip to Indonesia will be a precursor to the mega diplomatic meet which is scheduled in New Delhi on the 9th and 10th of September. So a lot of, it is the diplomatic season which is upon us, and let's see how it unfurls further. Thank you for all those updates. That was Siddhant Sibal, our diplomatic correspondent, joining us from New Delhi.